Hey guys, JB here from Alpha Wolf Consulting, coming to you today with another lesson in the Introduction to Sales and Communications course. And this lesson is all about building strong relationships with your buyers. So it's important to understand that, you know, we have to develop and cultivate a strong interpersonal relationship. Not to say that we need it to be an intimate interpersonal relationship, but we want to build a strong relationship with our buyers to where our buyers feel comfortable referring their friends, or if that's applicable, to where they feel comfortable asking questions. So if we think about it like this and give it an example of a builder, well, if I'm, let's say, doing a bathroom renovation at your house and I'm a carpenter, well, what I want to do is create a relationship with you, to where when you think about doing any form of renovation or any form of improvement, you think to call me and ask me and talk to me about, you know, about the different ideas that you may have, to find out information on costs and things like that. So we want to create a relationship of repeat communication. And, we can even see this in and think about it in terms of like property sales and real estate agents. Like, we sell someone a house, but we don't just want to end the relationship there, because their circumstances may change in the fact that they may need to move or want to move to a different location. They may want to downgrade or upgrade. They may want to, travel overseas, whatever it may be. So we would want to have a relationship to where, rather than them going out and finding a new real estate agent, they would come to us and sort of, you know, come to us to get an appraisal, to get an understanding, to make life easier for themselves. So this is very important in the terms of, when we're building strong relationships with our buyers, we're building relationships that last longer than just one sale. So we're focused on, when we're, qualifying and finding out our buyers, well, we want to actually understand their motivations, their interests, their concerns, their needs. So the focus isn't so much on, you know, trying to sell them everything, but it's more about, we're focusing on really building out and developing that customer profile of that customer avatar, in terms of, when we're qualifying, we're asking a lot of interpersonal skills, not skills, but interpersonal questions, in terms of, we're trying to understand, have they got a family? How are their family doing? Have they got any current interests? What are they doing for work? Like, we're trying to get these, because these are points of relation. So these are points that we're finding when we're building a strong relationship and we're asking questions and getting to know our, potential buyers, that we're trying to find all these different points where we can relate to them and create connection through shared experience or through shared commonality. So that's a very important thing. By understanding that a client has children, potentially that could lead them, to a range of different products or services. That could lead them to, being able to sort of understand their motivations and their interests, like where their focus is, So depending on the, if we were taking an example of being a real estate agent, well, if we understand that someone has kids, well, that changes and shifts the dynamic of the emotional decision making those buyers are going to have, because, child welfare and safety would come paramount, and satisfaction, to really, location. to, the property type. Like, for example, even if you're buying let's say a 10-bedroom mansion, if you're buying it in a really, really, poor, not so much poor, but a negative area or a high crime area where you're not going to feel safe and your children aren't going to be able to venture outside of the property unless they're escorted by you or a parent, like that's the thing. So it's sort of like we got to understand the different factors. Whereas, a young couple or a single may have different motivations, may not be too worried about the external neighborhood if the internal security systems are relevant and effective. You know what I mean? So we've just got to understand that, you know, when we're building a strong relationship, we're finding out and understanding our buyer on a more personal and interpersonal level to where we're able to gauge their personal motivations, motives, and intentions and intent. So this is the important thing because we're able to then construct our approach to best suit and appeal them when communicating the value of the benefits of the product or service. So, for example, if we understand that, we'll use the same example that someone has kids, okay, and let's say we're taking it in the context of we're a social media marketing company and we help small businesses and they're a small business owner and we understand that they have kids, well, we're able to tailor a lot of our sort of value propositions around getting them time back, around taking jobs off their plate so that they can spend more time with their children, but not have to worry about a downfall or a downgrade in the effectiveness of their productivity or their business's productivity. So it's really important that we understand this. But the other thing is that it allows us to, use the best tool that we can to influence someone. And the best tool we can use to ever influence anyone in any sales situation or any situation in life is to simply get them talking about what they love. So I'm going to tell you a bit of a story about an interaction I had yesterday with a charity sales agent. So, the ones that raise money for, and this was at Starlight. So what happens is typically the sales agents will try and, get you over and sort of, hard sell you and things like this. But instead of doing that, he was able to engage a conversation, but not engage a conversation with not so much that he didn't have the direct intent, but he didn't straight up go into the sales pitch. He didn't try and, ask me a question and then talk about the product. He asked me a question and then listened to the answer and then expanded and talked on that and then had a conversation where we developed and built rapport and then transitioned into the sales presentation. So we think about this in terms of face-to-face sales, and the first engagement is a lot of us think about it as being similar to a shortened sales presentation, but it's actually two parts. There is the personal relationship development stage, and then there is the transition to the presentation or initial presentation, depending on, if you go through the whole presentation or if you're just going through a brief scope of the presentation and looking to book interest to a demonstration or, so things like, for example, if we were out there getting people interested about signing up to a workshop, it's sort of like, where we're doing a preview presentation to generate the interest and generate enough interest so that they go into the full session where they get all the information. So to understand this is just to understand that we have to have that break in terms of in the way in which we communicate with people is very important in building the relationships. So we got to break it up from thinking about multitasking and trying to achieve multiple objectives in simultaneously, and we got to think about it more as a staged approach to achieving objections, where we're in the initial stage of developing an interpersonal or a friendly sort of demeanor and interaction, to where we can then ask through the transition. So the transition is the ask phase, or where we're going, do you have a second if I just tell you a little bit about this company that I'm representing today, and what we're out here doing. I've had an amazing time chatting to you, but I'd love to talk to you about this, because that's really what we're about at the moment. We're about getting out here and talking to people and raising awareness. So do you sort of see how that, when we're transitioning, we're respecting, look, I'm not just talking to you to sell you a product. I'm talking to you to get to know you as a person, but I'm here to sell a product. So it's sort of like, it's a different way to approach it, but typically what a salesperson will do, and what I mentioned to this sales guy, was that I was actually finishing my sales course off. So, you know, things like that to give him a bit of pre-warning that I understand sales, and if he tries to sell me, it's not going to work. So the thing was, is instead of trying to sell me on the benefits and on the kids and all that, he talked about his experience in the business, his experience, helping the kids, contributing in his way, how he could, you know what I mean? How, so instead of just talking about, we're here to get, money to go generate wishes for kids and things like that, it's talking about personal experience. So making the experience personal. So, like, what it means to him that they're able to make these wishes come true. You know what I mean? So rather than trying to make it sort of where you're trying to do the technical sell, where you're selling logically, it's selling through experience. So your experience of the product or service, your interpretation of, the company's direction and mission, in terms of, if the company is, let's say, trying to be the best, and let's stay with marketing, the best marketing company. Well, when we're talking about the company to potential buyers, we're talking about, our interpretation and belief of why we agree that it is the best marketing company, our personal experiences with other customers, with other, consultants, or the CEO, or, depending on the level of the client, will depend on the level of the, if we're talking about a multi-million-dollar client and sort of portfolio that of business that comes with it, well, then we would be talking in terms of, our interpretation of the leader, of the CEO, of the directors, and things like that, their mission, their goals for the company, you know, because that's what people buy in on. And that's what we forget, is that we want to talk about how great the results that we get for people, but what did those people feel? Do you sort of understand? So if we're talking about the results that we were able to get for a company in our last, for example, marketing run that we did for them, well, we're talking about, how did it feel to be able to produce that? We're talking around, how was the customer's experience? How were they feeling? What were their expectations? So we're sort of giving them the experience that the customers come through. And now we can structure this and sort of create it to be a very, very nice linear story to where it's sort of like it's a conversation that we're having where we're explaining, you know, like for example, if the customer asked about what services we do, we can create a story around a previous customer, let's say our last customer. And let's just for argument's sake, they were a landscaping business. Okay, so we were able to, John and Larry's landscaping came into us not really understanding, they'd done social media marketing before, but never really felt like it had gone the way that they wanted it to go. So they just didn't really have any high hopes, but they had heard along the grapevine about how we were able to help other businesses in their industry. So they came into the experience really not understanding, sort of like you would be at the moment, not understanding the value that can be had through effective, social media marketing and content strategies and things like that. And what we were able to do is gradually over, let's for argument's sake say it's an 8-week program, and for the first 4 weeks we were able to get in there with them and really give them a deep dive into social media marketing and how we're operating it for them so that they have a comprehensive understanding of the strategies and sort of the direction that we are taking them in the long term, and also the short-term milestones that we're hoping to achieve for them. And what we were able to do is we were able to set out clear expectations, and we were able to set out, a clear roadmap to success, because what's the easiest way that you can ever find a destination? Having a map. So we created a roadmap for them that took them on the journey of not really having too cohesive of a social media presence and a brand presence and a content strategy. And we were able to really get them going in terms of understanding, well, what direction do we want to take our content in? And then we were able to work with them to set that up. And then we looked at, all the different aspects, the brand. Do you sort of see how we're taking them on the experience, and we can put in their feelings and we can put in their emotions because for example, if we're telling the potential client this story about a past client and we're talking and saying that, they were really relieved at this point. Well, now the client is setting an expectation that when I set up and create my brand strategy and I create all of this and I get everything organized, I'm going to feel so relieved. So we're putting in these positive indicators, okay, through the way in which we communicate, okay? But also what we are doing is we are not sort of trying to over focus on the sale at the expense of the customer. So that's what we got to understand, is that while it's really important, for us to be able to present to the customer, it's more important for us to develop a relationship with every potential buyer than it is to present to every potential buyer. If we can develop a relationship, we are able to ask questions and gauge interest and compatibility for the product or service, and then we are able to choose to only present to those who meet the criteria and are qualified buyers. So do you sort of see how we do this in a face-to-face sales, or sort of like like if we were doing the charity stuff? The key thing is to start a relationship. So to start a conversation and develop a conversation, and then as you develop the conversation, you ask gauging questions around interest around the product, service, or the thing. And then you ask a direct question in terms of, hey, do you mind if I show you this? And you ask for permission to present them. Because if they say, oh, I'm not really interested in hearing about that, oh, that's okay. Do you understand much about like what charities do and things like that? And then you allow them to sort of answer you. And it's sort of like we've identified that they don't want to progress further. So it's sort of like we ask a question just to sort of gauge, where they're at, and not so much give them something to think about, but we want to sort of transition out. We want to transition out of the conversation and sort of let them go, so that it's not just like, oh, okay, you're not interested. Oh, so it's where it's sort of like, okay, easy. So you've sort of heard about this before. Oh, well, I won't hold you up anymore. I bet you got some shopping to get back to do. Do you know what I mean? So it's just a much more fluent and authentic of an experience, and more pleasant of an experience, that's more low risk in terms of them not being interested in what have to your product or service. Means like, it doesn't mean that there's conflict. It just means that you're not a buyer for, or they're not a buyer for you. So it's sort of letting them down easy, so that if they change their mind, or if they decide one day they want to be a buyer, there's no real sort of like hesitation due to past conflict. All right. Well, that's going to end this one. And I hope you enjoyed this one and you sort of understand a little bit more about developing strong and building strong relationships with your buyers and why it's important. And I'll talk to you next time. Thanks so much. Bye.